Ever feel like the resources and advice out there for women are missing something essential? I thought so too, which is why more than 6 years ago, I created She Said, She Said. I'm Laura Cox Kaplan, and after 3 decades in communications and then advocacy and now juggling motherhood and entrepreneurship, trust me, friend, I get it. Making a real impact takes more than just passion. It takes the right mindset, the right skills, the right investments, and the right community. On this show, we dive deep with incredible women from all walks of life who have been there. We uncover the secrets to building influence, navigating tricky relationships, and staying true to ourselves even when it's tough. And let's face it, it often is. I also throw in my own favorite productivity and life hacks, things that have shifted my perspective and might help you too. Wherever you are in your journey, my goal here is to leave you inspired to define success your way and to help you build the confidence you need to tackle your biggest goals. Subscribe today and let's unlock your full potential, your confidence, and your greatest influence. Hey friend, welcome to She Said, She Said podcast, episode 299. You know, leaving big ideas sitting on a shelf does nothing to help you build your influence or to impact the world in all the ways that you believe are important or that align with your mission and purpose, whatever that may be. Unfulfilled dreams and promises are literally one of the saddest things when a life ends before a dream is realized. And let's face it, most of us don't know when our day is coming or when we will take those last precious breaths. Now, not to be too morbid, but the topic does have a way of really focusing one's attention. And that is why I especially loved this week's conversation with the incredibly thoughtful and engaging Jodi Wellman. Now, Jodi is a psychologist, and she's also the author of a fantastic book, which is called You Only Die Once: How to Make It to the End with No Regrets. She is also a motivational speaker, and she's the founder of 4,000 Mondays. And by the way, 4,000 Mondays is the average number of Mondays in a person's life, assuming that you live to the statistically ripe age of 80. And hopefully you will live much longer than that. Jodi's book and the advice that she shares in our conversation this week will really help you make the most of what time you have while you're here, and it can also help make sure that you end up with fewer regrets when you do reach the end. Jodi's perspective is also especially helpful if you are finding yourself stuck, maybe stuck in a cycle of endless to-dos, or maybe just unfulfilled in your current job or your situation. That stuck can be precisely the stuff that creates really big regrets later on. Now, more to the point, if you have ever felt just overwhelmed by life's demands or caught in a cycle of regret, this conversation is just for you. Friend, I have to say, this conversation with Jodi really made me think. And it made me reflect on my own life and a particular project that I have been sitting on for, frankly, far too long. Now, if that sounds anything like you and you have a big dream or a big project that's just waiting for you to dust it off and bring it to life, I think this conversation will really resonate. I also think that you're going to be moved by how Jodi became inspired to do this work and to focus on mortality as a motivator in the first place. In addition to Jodi sharing her valuable insights, she also shares some practical tips and some strategies, which I know that you always appreciate. So, friend, let's jump in. Here is episode 299, my conversation with author and psychologist Jodi Wellman. Enjoy. Jodi, welcome to She Said, She Said.
Oh, I'm really excited to be here with you, Laura.
Well, I'm excited to have you. I have loved digging into your book and this incredible concept, which is, if nothing else, rather counterintuitive. You start from the end to help us think about how to live a fuller life. Let's start with sort of what took you on this journey and how you found this particular approach and work.
Oh, well, hey, I am happy to. And thank you for mentioning the starting with the end. Remember back in the day, was it like the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? Like begin with the end in mind. I think I took it a little bit literal, like begin with the big end in mind, like your death day in mind. You know, I when I think about how I kind of came by this appreciation for the Grim Reaper, let's just say it, I've always had a general sense of amusement, and I'm going to choose that word on purpose because I've always found it to just be like, well, hey, if we can't, we don't want to cry about it, let's just laugh about it. The fact that we're all working really hard to manage and maybe sometimes even perfect, dare I say, but like have a really good time and do it well and all the great stuff, self-improvement our lives away, and then we're all gonna totally die. I mean, it's bizarre, it's absurd. So I've always found that interesting, even as a kid. And then fast forward, the real impetus for me was around my mom dying when she was 58, and she died of a heart attack. And it was a really eye-opening experience, not just because like you'd think that the story is, oh, right, good illustration that life's short, and you might not get your 4,000 Mondays, because that's the average lifespan. But it was actually not so much that. It was more that I saw that she died with so many regrets. She had all these dreams. In the book, I call it like the land of dormant intentions when I was cleaning out her apartment. Like, we're talking so many neat business plans. She wrote manuscripts of kids' books, short stories. She had drawings. She had all these things that she was a really creative, wonderful person. And she just didn't have the confidence to send any of this stuff out or to press the go button. And that was riveting because, well, I was sad for her that she didn't, she had a lot of coulda, shoulda, wouldas, as I say. But in all honesty, I thought, I am cut from the same cloth. Like I recognize that I have an inclination to be creative and to want to do things and then also chicken out. And I thought, I do not want to get to the end. Whenever my end is, whether I get to be 88 or unfortunately just 58, or, I could keel over tomorrow. I hope I'm going to knock on melamine here that I don't. But the idea of dying with regrets, of the coulda, shoulda, wouldas, of all the dreams and plans and hopes. I'm not going to we will not have time for all the things we want to do, but the ones that matter, it just seemed to me like a travesty that we don't do this life justice. And so then I, quite frankly, that was the major seed planted to say, how do I start researching this, talking about this, and maybe even make it my life someday?
Yeah. You open the book largely with this story, and it is such a compelling read. And I found myself as I was reading the story, thinking about all those things and thinking about other people in my life, but both currently and people in the past who maybe had all these big ideas or all this potential and sometimes just never got around to it, right? And it's such a common thing. We have the to-do list and all the things. In the last episode, I talk about, making the most of your to-do list and combining it with your to-be list, the person that you hope to be, and merging these things together. But we get so wrapped up in all the doing and just the daily TikTok that you oftentimes don't make time for some of these bigger dreams.
Yes, I love that you've said that, because the thing about, I didn't either make the time or the time wasn't available. We all know that no one will hand us the time. That would be rare. Although I will say that there is a little hot tip, like, when someone cancels a meeting, I think that's like a free hour in your life. That to me is like, that's the gold, just as an aside. Because, it's like, well, what do? I want to squander that and answer emails, or do I want to use that towards a dream? But you've hit on something massive, which is this idea, like, I think many of us have that deep-seated fear that we're going to let our lives pass us by, and that we become just these sort of routinized robots that go through the motions of living for the to-do list. Kind of like in work, sometimes you can just realize, like, wait a minute, is my full-time job just to answer emails, or am I getting any actual cool work done? It's the difference of, wait a minute, if time won't find me, so how do I carve out the time? Because most of us do this thing where we take time for granted that we're going to have it later. And I am here to say, not just because, mom dies at 15, everybody listening knows of someone who died way earlier than that, but later is just a mirage.
Yeah.
I think that, it's a comforting thing to think I'll do it when work dies down, or we'll go on that really cool trip later, or I'll start the side business later, or even worse, I'll do that when I retire.
Yeah.
I mean, don't even get me started about retirement. The thing that we're pushing off to later, I believe, is like a twofold problem, because later may not come, or later may mean that we are, I don't know, you could have like really bad rheumatoid arthritis and you can't do all the walking around Rome that you planned for that great trip. Or
dementia.
things,
You might not
right?
remember anything, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, there are so many risks about quote unquote later, but even more perilously, I think that it's what about now? Like what about the lives we're living now? Because this is our only experience of being human, is like literally the present moment, or quite frankly, like as far as you can see in your calendar, so maybe several months in advance. Who's sticking up for just making that, we're saying, wait a minute, if we've really wanted to go to Rome, I'm waiting for things to die down. Later is a TBD with a really big asterisk, which is like, yeah, right. What about if I just planned it? What if I said it's not going to be super convenient? There is no convenient week to take vacation. Can we all just agree? There's just a matter of picking the one that's going to be the least bad time off. And then you take the time off and you'll have a great time and you're so glad you did it.
Right.
And so what about honoring now and making some of our, and I use Rome as an example. It's sort of a fun one, but like it could be the scarier stuff, like, going out there and brushing up your resume and going for a new job, or applying for the bigger job, or maybe it's making a big move, or maybe it is starting your podcast or something that feels really scary, now, not later.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, Jodi, let's back up a bit and talk about, so you were not originally doing this work. This is work that you kind of stumbled across. This was, something that really interested you, but you were in a corporate job, probably a terrific corporate job, but you were not fulfilled, I think it's fair to say. Maybe talk us through your journey and how you actually found the work that you're doing now.
Yeah. So you are exactly right about corporate job. I worked in the health and wellness field for 17 years. I was, let's just say, felt stuck by the trappings of success. And I'm sure nobody can identify with that. The feeling of, I think I want something different. I want something more. I don't know what that is. And so therefore I will let that paralyze me.
Amen.
I will do like jack shit about it. Right. Discomfort is often a long-term motivator of like, oh, I'm just going to wallow in it for a while. And I kept hoping to be plucked out of my state of disenchantment. I don't know why I feel defensive. I want everybody to know that nobody knew I was disenchanted. I was still doing a good job, but I was really inside hoping for, wanting for something different and more. And I tell this story, and you'll remember from the book, Laura. Like, I remember loading my stapler one day in my office, and I was stapling pages, and my stapler ran out. Okay, fine, big deal. I go and I reload it, get the little row of staples, and I stick it in there. And I remember saying, I better not be here by the time this row of staples runs out. And it gave me this weird sense of optimism, like, yeah, I have a plan, like I'm committed. Except I went back to my desk and I continued to do diddly squat about finding a new life. And then a year later, my staple runs out, and I'm like, I am the worst, because I did nothing to get myself out of this despair. Now, in retrospect, like, I think I needed to go through that. Unfortunately, for several years, I ended up working with a coach to help me figure out, at that time, it was about getting into leadership development and executive coaching. And that to me felt like this new, fresh beginning. And it was really a great next step for me. And then there was always this topic in the background, this topic of mortality as a motivator. I was squirreling away all the articles I could find, all the quotes, all the seize the day stuff. And, I was just very much building more and more of a fascination on this topic. But I didn't know what to do with it. Here I am, I'm doing corporate development programs for new leaders. Like, how am I going to talk to you about the fact that you're totally going to die?
Right. No one was talking about death, really, right? That's fair to say.
Right. So I I had this funny thing where, like many of us recognize that feeling of like there's almost like an internal debate going on about like, wouldn't it be cool if I could find a way to make this thing that I'm really passionate about actually be the star of the show in my life, not just like this background that I'm like almost creating more tension trying to figure out how to do it. And so I know not all of us can make our hobbies our vocation, but maybe we can. I mean, maybe there's just a way to say, like for me, I went back to school and did my master's in positive psychology at University of Pennsylvania. And I did my thesis on this topic of memento mori, which is the Latin phrase that means remember we must die. And that for me was my real door opening because it gave me the confidence back to, the lacking confidence coming from my mom.
Right.
But it gave me that sense of like, oh, if this stuff's empirically based, I can talk about it with more authority on a stage and I can make this somehow, corporate or something that people will want to actually hear about in a motivating way.
Yeah.
And that helped me say, it actually got to the point, Laura, where I couldn't not do it. Like I couldn't not make it my focus in life, my new brand, my new job, everything. So I moved away from a business partnership with a great business partner, a dear friend, that I was like, I don't want to do this executive coaching and leadership development anymore. I want to go over here and start 4,000 Mondays. And I'll be honest with you that was really hard for me because I'm very conflict avoidant. And to me, that felt like a conflicty thing. And I got over it and I did it. And now I'm a good example again of how pursuing the dreams we have. Yeah, I would say it's not always easy. It's not often easy. And that's precisely why it feels so fantastic when you do it, because you feel like I gave it a go. Rather than getting to the end on my deathbed and thinking like, imagine how ironic that would be if I got to my freaking deathbed and I was like, I never did that thing with death. Now I can say I did.
Yeah. Can you provide the audience with a little bit of advice? Because I think what you just described is such a common challenge where you find yourself at these juncture points. You see an opportunity, maybe something that's really just lighting you up inside. You want to go do it, but you're not quite sure how and whether to take the risk. Maybe talk a little bit about how you reached that conclusion and ultimately move forward.
Yeah. I think that I had proven a bit of a concept first. So I think that, I think about people that are working in a job and they're thinking, well, I think I might want to start something else or go do something else. I think if you, going blindly could work for some people, but I think having enough research done in the background, I don't mean topical research, like about what, the concept of, temporal scarcity, like what I talk about, the fact that time is running out. It's that while I was still doing the work I was doing, so working with corporations and leaders and so on, I did build a workshop. And at the time I called it Die Happy, whatever, mildly clever. And I went and did it and I found a women's group to present in front of. And I was like, let this be a test run. Like, could this be, like, let me just see if this totally crashes and burns. And it luckily didn't. No one left the room. And it was okay. It was good. It was like, it gave me more energy. And it also gave me a little bit of okay, there's something here.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not just going to go dive into the deep end of the pool. I'm just going to maybe step into the shallow and not head first. So I do feel like that was a bit of an important step of like, I've got a proof of concept. There's maybe some interest in this. How would I expand it? And so I also had a bit of a template in mind, because keep in mind in the work I was doing, I was already doing a lot of programs and workshops and retreats for companies in a different concept. And so for me, I was just going to switch it out for a very different topic. So in a way, there was a little bit of like the bones were there. So that helped me feel like it de-risked some of it.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, let's be honest. I mean, there is a lot of risk if you're going to start talking about mortality. So that just makes me, certifiably crazy perhaps to have made that my brand. But I just still felt so called that, again, I was sort of, it was not an option not to do it. And I will just maybe, I don't know whether that's divine inspiration or just insanity, but sometimes you really listen to your gut. But the combo of having there be a bit of a proof, having an outline of like, here's what I would do. I was really thoughtful about like what my offerings would be so that I wasn't going to just like quit my job and start from scratch one day. Now, I'm going to put a little pin in that though, because I do think that I've seen a lot of dreams die on the vine when I was back like coaching individuals back in the day. Because there is this weird comfort that comes from being in the situation you're currently in, which is not good enough, but it's good enough to stay. And you keep thinking, well, I'm going to chip away and maybe work on that other dream. Sometimes you do need to just go cold turkey. And so I'm going to like fly in the face of everything I just said about having it be a little bit of an overlap and make sense of it. Don't not do your research at night or on weekends, or quite frankly, during the day while you're bored at your current job of what you want to do. But I think sometimes we need the discomfort, and you need a little bit of sometimes that sense of urgency, which quite frankly comes back to my whole topic, which is we need the urgency to know that we have X number of Mondays left, like I've got 1,812 as of this week, in order to take action. Sometimes we do need to know that, oh, I don't have a paycheck coming in order to maybe make the next big thing happen, if that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. And so much of what you just described strikes me too, that you were doing things and taking steps. You were taking risks, and the risks were like your proof points, and you were building your confidence through the process that you were going through, right? You were getting feedback from presumably the people in the room who were hearing this concept for the first time, and this big aha moment that they were having, this counterintuitive idea that they were like, oh my God, I've never thought about it like that. That's really the coolest thing I've ever heard. And so presumably that was helping to build your confidence so that you got stronger and more confident, and it just became like, obviously I'm going to take this risk, right? Is that sort of a good summary?
Really good, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you know, I would have, I don't know if everybody said this is the coolest thing I've ever heard. I mean, I didn't get any of those exact sound bites, but thank you for your extreme confidence in my content.
If I had been there, I would have said that.
Thank you, but I would have hugged you. But I think you're super right. And then maybe the action that comes out of that is like being deliberate about putting yourself in a position where you keep doing the thing that is energizing and that is informative. Like, you know, and we're talking specifically now about like launching a business. And there are a lot of things, just as an example, that are de-energizing in that process for some of us.
Sure.
You know, so it could be the admin for some people, or it could be the arduousness of mapping out a strategic plan. You just want to jump in and start doing stuff. Whatever the thing is, my encouragement around that is like, rather than going deep for like 2 full weeks of like planning your bookkeeping system, I don't know why that would take 2 weeks, but work with me. You want to make sure then that you're still finding time every single day to do the thing that is fizzly and fun for you, you know? And so it's like, maybe it's even being intentional. I'm very intentional about the calendar. It's like literally the way that we map out our lives till we die is like, if I was to look at how I want to organize my life for the next, 3 weeks while I'm doing this thing, or maybe for the rest of us, it's like while you're planning that big vacation, not all of it's energizing, but keep coming back to the thing that is energizing just to keep the flame in your furnace burning.
Yeah, yeah. You talk about in the book, and I've heard you talk about this in other speeches and presentations, about how habits can be kind of a double-edged sword, that they can be sort of almost anesthetizing, if you will, to use some of your vernacular and sort of the concepts. But they can be dulling for us. And I think that too is very counterintuitive, because you think about those habits, especially the good ones. If you do it over and over and over and over and over again, you get better at whatever it is you're doing. So maybe describe the concept of how to be at least aware of how habits can be counterproductive at times.
Yeah. And I recognize, like, I'm a pretty organized person. I like process. I like things to work and on time. And, habits are the things that keep the wheels on the bus, right? And so here I am suggesting that habits are not good. I will say that they're good when we're establishing a healthy habit. Like if we want to get into the habit of like getting a healthy routine going, like going to the gym, and then here's where it will anesthetize us. Thank you. It will let us slip into autopilot, where we just we glaze over and we're not conscious to what we're doing, which is in many ways the benefit of a habit. It just becomes like rote. But we're talking right now about this idea about living an astonishingly alive life. And there comes a risk point with habits that they are dulling and they are too routinized and we become robots. And so my encouragement is this. We don't need to bust the habit and say, you're no longer going to the gym Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. You got to figure it all out and just go rogue. No, maybe you still keep your Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, but are you going through the motions when you're there? Like even that language is deliberate about going through the motions, because that's not the kind of life most of us want to live in aggregate. And so I would just say, maybe for you, it just means like once a month, commit to doing something crazy with your workout, trying a very different thing, doing the boxing class, or going and just stretching that's actually, I think I'm just going to stretch tonight. That's my choice. It's so easy. But do something different. Take, if you got the same commute day in and day out, shake it up, get off, 2 streets early and just check out some new streets. Your routine with your dinners, or with your date night, spicing it up just even a little bit, and not all the time, because that might be anxiety inducing for some of us who like structure, but recognize where habits are helping you and where they might be in a little bit of a way hurting you, because it is making you a highly functioning zombie.
Yeah. To that point, you have a fun quiz on your website that is called, as I wrote it down here, and of course I don't have it in my notes. You have a really fun quiz on your website, which I took this morning. But maybe I want to get into some of the tools and some of the ways that we can begin to at least become more aware, which I think is probably the starting point. Maybe talk us through where to start.
Yeah, the awareness, you just chose the perfect word about aware. In the book I talk about the pre-mortem is what comes first. And I know it's a silly phrase, but work with it. The idea about like getting to know yourself, like what is the stuff that's already lighting you up in your life? And like, just here's the spoiler there is like, do more of that stuff. What is making you feel dead inside? What is the stuff that you yearn to do? What are the things, like getting really an introspective look. So awareness of like, just let me just take my pulse, assuming I have one. What's going on in my life right now? So that often is a good first step. But even if we just want to get rudimentary, my very favorite thing is for us to count how many Mondays we have left. And there's a calculator on my website if you don't want to do this mortality math. It's on the resources page and it's just super easy. And that helps because this gets back to this whole entire philosophy that when we're cognizant that our time is ticking, and we all know it, like nobody here this isn't news to anybody that we're dying, but when we really do that math and doing it by weeks, like I call it by Mondays, is somehow more startling than talking about the years left for many of us. And I want us to be startled, not in a thanks, now I'm in an existential crisis kind of startling, but in a way to go, oh, this doesn't feel very great. But usually what happens for most healthy humans is that we go, 1812, like that, okay, that's diminishing. And then it tends to move into that motivation about, okay, wow, this time is precious. How do I want to prioritize it? And one of the best ways to figure out how to prioritize it is, another exercise could be the deathbed regret exercise. Right. We've all heard this, probably done it in one way or form, but I really want us to get literal and not think about the regrets about the things that we wished we hadn't done, because psychology research is clear that those are the things that tend to not matter when we're getting close to death or even as we age. The thing that we will lament are what's called paths not taken. So these are the regrets about the things that we wished we had done but hadn't. So the exercise is, what would I regret if tonight was my night? Damn it. And I was looking back on my life, what would be the things that I would think, man, I always said that I wanted to learn how to play the ukulele, I don't know, or I wanted to learn how to speak French, or I wanted to start that Etsy shop, or whatever it is. If there's an example, and write them all out, no, nothing is too small. I said to my husband on our walk this morning, I was like, what is mulligatawny soup? We have no idea. But I just said, that's my new, I can't die before making and having mulligatawny soup. It's so stupid, right? But these are the bullet points that make up life.
It's not stupid if it's important to you, right? That's
right. Can I ask you, you know what mulligatawny soup is?
No, I've never heard of that. I don't know what that is.
Okay. So Somebody's gonna know. Anyway, I'm gonna figure it out. But that's an
no
example
judgment. If you want that, that's that's great.
Right. I might hate it, but I just need to know and I need to try it. Anyway, so it could be a big thing, it could be a small thing. Doesn't matter. All of it counts.
Right.
And then you get to look at your list and go, wow, I would feel serious pangs of regret if tonight was my night. And I looked at that and I said, I didn't plan that big family reunion that I've been talking about for years, or I didn't, whatever the thing is. And then you get to go, I call them pregrets because they're not quite regrets. They're like the step before, and you could still course correct them. You could still, make a plan and book the trip for fall of 2027, or you could register online, or you could download the app to speak the language, or you could go. And the point is, it helps to orient us to the fact that time is ticking and it will not wait for you and it will not carve out time. You just need to identify if I said this matters, and I would be kind of bummed at myself at the end. Or if my kid was cleaning out my apartment and I had all these dreams and ideas written down on a list, like eating mulligatawny soup, and I didn't do it, not because I care about what people will think of me at the end, but more like I want to live a life now that is actually delivering on some of these things. So the deathbed regret thing could actually help prioritize what your real intentions are. And then you get to decide which ones to do first.
Yeah. I'm struck by a couple things. As I was reading this and going through and doing some of the exercises myself, I would be quick to admit that I have, a mini panic attack as I think about calculating the number of Mondays that are left or the number of weeks left in my life. And I have a bit of just a personal aversion to this idea. It's really scary. And I don't think I'm probably unique in that regard. I think a lot of people are afraid or have some fear as it relates to the end or getting to the end. Jodi, how do we deal with that fear, which I think is a very natural thing, but how do we deal with that?
Thank you. You're so spot on. It is the most natural human reaction, so much so that because death is not part of our culture, we're kind of fascinated by it in a morbid way, but we don't want to talk about it, we don't want to think about it, and that's so normal. So I think the first step is to normalize it, that we come by the denial honestly. I think the second step is then to learn and wow, denying death comes at a price. So existential psychologists and therapists are kind of clear that when we have even a bit of a deep or unconscious anxiety about death, it actually takes a toll on us and it compromises the way we do live our lives. And I'm always fascinated by the relationship in research between death anxiety and our perception that we're living our lives, like we're getting out there and participating. And I just love this so much because, of course, it bolsters everything that I encourage us to do, which is to identify what we want to do and then get out there and do it, because the unlived life actually exacerbates death anxiety. And think about it. It's because you got on one school of thought, it's that I don't want to die because there's all this stuff I still want to do.
Right.
But if you are pretty confident that, I want to do a ton of things, and I have put them on a list and I've kind of rank ordered them, and I know that the order might change because my interests and priorities might change over the years, but I'm on it. I'm showing myself that I'm worth it and that I care, and I'm chipping away at this list, and I'm kind of proud of myself that I'm doing it. The big things, the small things, all the things. And no, I won't have time to do it all. And sometimes that's acceptance. That's actually an acceptance that's important for us to do, is to, especially for us ambitious people, where we want to do it all. Don't tell me I can't go to all the countries. Don't tell me I can't start all the businesses I want to start. Yeah, you're going to have to pick, honey. But that's okay, because then there is a bit of a gentle acceptance that does come from that act of reprioritizing. So I think the very act of getting on with it and doing it and making time and giving ourselves credit and saying, good for you. You crossed something off your bucket list. That's incredible. Look at this life you're living out there. That does tend for most of us to help us say, okay, I don't want this inevitable death to come, but I will at least feel like I gave it a go when it does come.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a really, really great way of thinking about that concept and kind of getting a handle on this fear that we oftentimes have. Maybe let's talk for a minute about the model that you crafted as it relates to how we should think about these different sort of quadrants. I'm not doing a great job of explaining it, but maybe talk a little bit about the model itself and maybe a bit about the science behind it.
Oh, great. I'm so happy you asked. Okay, so this to me gets me so excited, even more excited than the Grim Reaper. And because, again, to be super clear, we talk about him because it helps to animate us to live. Okay, so that's
Right.
out of the way. So it's not just living longer, because that would be good, but most of us acknowledge it's like the quality of life, not the quantity. So then I'm just interested in the other dimensions, like what about living wider and deeper? And this is where this, I think, gets exciting, is, okay, think about living wider as having to do with vitality. And this is the fun, and this is the pleasure. It's like what the traditional like happiness. It's like going and doing fun things and having a blast. And it's just this, you're experiencing life. So literally like vitality, that's that. And for most of us, if we were to even just to do a rudimentary scale of 1 to 10, how are you feeling on the vitality scale of having cool experiences and pleasure? Most of us can come up with a number. Okay, there, hold that. The other dimension is living deeper. And that's the one that's associated with having meaning in life. And it could be about feeling like what you're doing has some kind of purpose. It could be about having meaningful connections to other people, like relationships in your life. Could be spirituality. It could be a sense of wonder and awe. It's like good character virtues. And so it's the deeper stuff, compared to the fun stuff of going out and trying the tasting menu and going on a picnic. And so same question, scale of 1 to 10, like where might you be if you were to think about the depth in your life in terms of meaning? And then, what happens, of course, if you take the width and the depth and you picture it as like an x-axis and a y-axis and you put them on top of each other, well, there's the quadrant. And the goal, of course, is to be anywhere positive on the vitality side and anywhere positive on the meaning side. And that's the quadrant that would be like astonishingly alive. And, some of us dip into there every day. Some of us are there and we just want more of it. And some of us find ourselves kind of camped in some of those other quadrants, which is, to me, I think just a framework that can help us look at our lives and better diagnose, to be super honest. When you have that niggling sense, like something's missing in my life or I want more. Maybe it's more than a niggling. Maybe it's a nagging, or it's like actually hitting you violently across the head. Something's not right. I think that this is a good way to start and be like, where would be resonant? Is it about that you want, is it that you are working and at a job that's meaningful, or you're raising kids and that's meaningful, so I've heard, or you're doing things that are meaningful, but you're so bored and you just know that you want to have some fun again, then that's your action plan. It's like, how do I do one thing this month that's really going to make me feel like I made a choice to come alive and have more fun? Maybe I'm going to go check out that concert in the park, or maybe I'm going to go register for that online learn how to do a collage program. I don't know. Or you might be thinking, you know what, I'm having fun. We're good. I'm doing the things. I am trying the new roller coasters, or I'm making new recipes. I'm good. But I feel like it's empty. Like I don't have any purpose. I'm like floating aimlessly, and or my relation, like I want more like more substance in my life. This is good. This is your indicator. Then that might be the area where you want to do one thing within the next month as well.
Yeah.
Maybe it is about going back to that religious service you used to love, or maybe it's about going somewhere in nature that makes you feel that sense of awe, or maybe it is about going and volunteering because you feel like, I used to do that and that made me feel good, picking it up again, so it's a good way to diagnose in a way, like where are you at and where do you want more of?
Yeah. And it strikes me too that it's also about being more aware of those moments of joy that are happening to you already, right? Without changing anything, just being more, and you talk about this in the book, so it's not my own idea, but it's, it's recognizing these moments of joy and really sort of living in that.
I am so glad you mentioned that, because I do think that there's pressure that can come from this idea about, okay, wait, I have to live an astonishingly alive life. This means I need to make changes. I don't like change. And I got to quit my job. What do I have? Like, I have to do a lot of big things. And I love, one of the coolest things that I research, and I just see this time and time again with groups and individuals, sometimes it's the smallest, sweetest little things that make the difference, that if we just orchestrate our days with just a little more intention to fit in those things that do bring us joy, it changes the trajectory of our days and then therefore our lives, because our lives are just a collection of little moments that are just crazy glued together. So why not? If there's a woman I talked to recently, and she gave this really beautiful, simple story about how she was working, had a laptop, and she's like, I just made the decision to go outside in the Adirondack chair in her backyard and take her coffee outside. And she said, I was still doing some work. So we're not talking here about, oh, you have to take a break from, like, oh, I don't know, take your work in your laptop. But she said, just sitting there. And I would normally never have done that in the middle of my day. But looking at the clouds and the birds and the trees and just listening to like a lawnmower in the distance, or tasting the coffee. She's like, my coffee tasted better outside, which we all know is just like, it's in your head, but it's a good thing. Like, why not orchestrate and design your days or time with that? You know, it doesn't have to take a lot of time. Usually doesn't take any money at all, these sweet, simple things. And you know what, maybe it is about just making the time before you get into your crazy dinner routine about everybody. We're all just going to read a chapter in a book that might just be really fun and exciting to read. Or we're going to stop and, you know, I know one gentleman who stops his work day and he reads Proverbs. He started doing this recently, and he's like, I just love my life so much more because I take 5 minutes. And, or, you know, everyone's different, right? There's no prescription, but it's being aware of like, what is an example? And that's my actual exercise, is write out 30 things that are kind of simple to do in your life. And it could range from easy to less easy. You know, walking around the block or walking for 30 minutes may be not part of your MO, but maybe you could take that 14 minutes and do that before your day starts. And that might give you a new lease on life getting into your job. So little things that we can do. And I think we just overlook the capacity and the impact it makes.
Yeah, absolutely. Jodi, thank you. I have loved this conversation. It has been such a privilege to talk to you. To remind folks, the book, which I'll include a link in the show notes, is called You Only Die Once: How to Make It to the End with No Regrets. Jodi's website is called 4,000 Mondays, right? Did I get that right? I'm so rusty. I'm sorry. I've loved this conversation. Thank you so much. Anything else that I'm missing, or anything else you want to share with the audience before I let you go?
I just want to thank you for having this conversation and for being willing to, you know, quite frankly, like introduce the Reaper into our conversation and for your listeners, because I do, of course, I'm biased, but I think it's really valuable to include in our conversations so we can live more fully.
Okay, friend, what is that project or maybe that dream that you have left sitting on the back burner? Did this conversation make you think differently about it? I would love to hear your thoughts. You can send them my way with a quick review of the episode from wherever you're listening, or you can send me an email directly. You'll find me at info@shesaid.media. In the meantime, friend, have a great rest of your week, and I'll talk to you again next time. Take care. And remember, She Said podcast is a weekly production of She Said Media.